Welcome back to this 6th edition of our Excel training series. This is actually the 4th part that we're going to be talking about the Excel formula bar basics. In this edition, we're going to be talking about probably one of the most powerful and best reasons for using Excel as a tool, and that is accessing its function capability. So here are the categories that those 471 functions are grouped into, of which there are 14 categories. And again, just like with the formulas, some of these categories you may never get engaged into, but this is one easy way to group them and to go searching for commands, and you will see later how you use these categories to find functions that you may need. Now, please note that there is also that 15th category that isn't really a category but recently used. So as you use more Excel functions, then you will have a list of the ones that you are commonly using. There is a resource on Microsoft's website that references and provides a little additional information about all the various functions that I have put a shortcut down below. Let's take a look at that. Here we've navigated to Microsoft's website where they have a page that lists all the different Excel functions alphabetically. So all you need to do is navigate to the first letter down here. So the first function we're going to talk about in a minute is the sum function. But if I click on this and scroll down here, eventually I will find the sum function here in the list. And you can click on that function and then they give you some information about what it does and a little instruction video on how to use it, which is helpful. So there's a link for that. You can see it here, but it's also referenced down below in the YouTube video. Here are the 6 functions that we're going to cover, and they're basically self-explanatory, but the first one is the sum function, which is probably the most common one you'll be using. Next is much less commonly used, but the count function is helpful in certain circumstances. The average, that's pretty obvious, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things to look at there. If is a very powerful function, and you will probably use this quite a bit. There is also a companion function called IFS, I-F-S, and it's a little bit different, but it is maybe a little bit easier to use in certain circumstances, and we'll talk about that. Then there's SUMIF, which is basically a combination of the sum function and the if function, and the same goes for the COUNTIF functions. So let's transition over to Excel and take a look at some of this. So here we are in Excel, and let's talk about how we bring up the function capability first. So the easiest way to do it is to click up here in the formula bar, and then all you need to do is press this insert function right here is a good way to start. So if I click on this, then you're going to get the dialog box for creating a function. So here you can see it's set on the category of most recently used, and if I click here you will see all the different selections that I showed you earlier. So this is where the 14 different categories are, and then there's an all. If you want to search for one, you can go up here and say you want to search for the sum function. You can put that there, and then you can go ahead and click go, and then it brings up the different types of sum functions, of which there are many, but we're going to start with this first one here. Now, if you want help with a function, see how I have this clicked. If you click down here in the lower left, if you click on that, it brings up that same sheet that I showed you earlier here in the browser, and it just brings up the same formula with the same details. So this is even a faster way of getting to the instructions about how to use a function that I was showing you earlier. Now, one of the nice things is if we go to a little bit more complicated function is, well, we'll start with the sum. Now, one of the nice things about creating functions is that Excel gives you hints on how to formulate them, which is here. So here are the function arguments. And say I wanted to just sum everything in this January column. I'm here on this, and I just click this down. Okay, and then you can see the address up here that it's created. If I hit OK, then I get that. Now, one of the things that you may have noticed when I was showing you what the definitions of the formulas is, if I click period here, then now it lets me create a second range. And a lot of people don't really know that you can do this with a lot of Excel functions, but now I can pick up this range, and I can pick up this range. And then there is the total of those three columns, or the first quarter of units. So you can see that there is some help and hints on how to set up a formula. There are also hotkeys for the sum, but I'm not going to cover that right now. So briefly, here is our little demo model that we're going to use here. So this is essentially a forecast for 2023, and these are all in units over here. And then these are the average sales prices. So let's start with the sum function here and show you how you could sum up everything in the bottom pretty easily. So if I highlight all these cells at the bottom of these columns and I click up here in the formula bar and I hit sum, I can just now tell Excel what I want it to sum here. I hit my right parentheses, and I'm just going to hit Control Enter, and it will automatically copy this formula across all these columns. And there you have it. Now you have it with each one of these sum functions across the bottom. Then if I want to do the same over here for the total, I just type in sum, and I capture everything in the top row. And then I hit my right parentheses and hit Control Enter. So that's basically how you use the sum. It's pretty simple, and I showed you how to put multiple ranges, but there is the summary of all our units we plan to ship. So next, let's talk about count. Count is pretty simple. There's a lot of different versions of count, but count is just basically going to count the non-blank cells above. So if I just type in count with my left parentheses, and then I just want to look at what it's going to come up with for all these different cells, just put in my right parentheses, and then it comes up with 10 rows. So this isn't particularly helpful, but you get the idea. Now, if I were to delete this item here, you can see that it does not count blank columns, but it does count 0. So you just need to be aware of how it handles blanks versus zeros if you're adding that up. If you just have a letter here, then it does not count that. It's only counting up the values. Now next up is the average function. Now here I've just manually added in my own average calculation, just taking and dividing my sum by my count to get my average. So I'll get the same answer here using the average function. You have to spell out the whole word average and then highlight the cells that you want in your average. And there you go. I'm going to hit Control Enter and paste those across all the other columns, and you can see I get the same exact average as before. Now if I take one number out of that, you can see it acts the same. 0, that handles 0 the same. If I put in a letter, it handles the letter the same. So you can see my manual average and Excel's function both work exactly alike. Next, we have the SUMIF formula. Now, the SUMIF is basically, as the name would indicate, is a combination of the sum and the if functions. So here, if I'm going to do as I usually do, I type in SUMIF, and then you can see here it brings up what I need to provide. Now, the first parameter I need to provide is the range. So the range is where I want it to look to create the match. So this is the column where I'm going to want it to look, because I'm going to have it tell me what is the total of all the units related to the Big Kahuna product type. So then the third parameter, the criteria, I'm just going to have it look to this cell here in column F. So that will be right there. And then I want it to sum all the units in this column. Now initially it's going to come up with a 0, but now if I put in this cell, which is where it's looking for the criteria, if I put in Big Kahuna, you can see that it found all that. So now I want to copy this all the way across. Now I have to adjust some of these cell references, because you can see they're all relative right now. So when I copy this across, I want this criteria to remain fixed. So I press F4 to put $2 around that to make that fixed. And then my criteria, I'm going to want that to remain fixed as well. Now when I copy it across, it's going to leave the criteria column, the criteria the same, but it's going to then paste this for G and H and I and so on and so forth as I copy it across. So in order to copy it across, I'm just going to grab this little handle down here, and then I just pull this straight across. And that's how you do a SUMIF formula. Now the COUNTIF is very similar to the SUMIF formula. So once again, I'm going to start here. I'm going to start typing the formula, COUNTIF, and then it asks me for the same information as before, except I just need to give it the criteria. So the range I wanted to look at is here. And then the criteria I want is here. And I'm just going to use the same cell as I did for the SUMIF and hit enter. And then you can see that I have 7 Big Kahunas up here. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So again, same thing. I want to copy this all the way across. So I have to make the criteria, or the range, it's got to be absolute, and the criteria is absolute. Hit enter, then do the same thing, pull this across, then it gives me the same number all the way across. Now obviously these numbers are not changing, so having them all the way across the columns isn't particularly helpful, but you get the idea. Now if I wanted to, I could come down here and I could come up with whatever the average is by product for each one of these. So I'm going to just copy that, and I'm going to put down the product type average, which is just going to be taking that divided by that. So there you have it. There's the average per month of the Big Kahunas in January is 1,342 units. Now if you wanted to, you could just now change this one cell, and then it would do it for the minute. Then it recomputes it all automatically for you. So I hope you found that interesting. Those are some pretty common formulas that you would use to get some financial analysis done. And I would encourage you to play around with those a bit and get to know them better. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe down below and check out our website. You'll see the link here on the screen. Thank you and bye.